Welcome to the District of Summerlands.
Just wondering if we go dark, the public are just watching on the internet. They're not, no one will be phoning in to ask questions or anything like that. I guess you're going to explain it.
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome everyone to the Utilities Open House for 2021 utility rates. As you know, we're on Zoom because of COVID. I'd like to introduce, my name is Tony Boot, I'm the mayor of the district, and I'd like to introduce Councillors Carlson, Aaron Carlson, and Councillor Marty Van Alphen, who are joining us today. Dave Svetlichny, who is our Director of Finance.
Just signed in as
Okay, Dave Svetlichny, who is our Director of
Oh, something happened.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. I got kicked off for a moment. Councillor Doug Holmes has joined us as well. Our Director of Finance, Dave Svetlichny, will be leading us through the presentation. If you have questions, please ask them at the end of the presentation and direct them to Mr. Svetlichny or any of the other staff that are here. Councillor Aaron Trainer has also joined us. So I'd like just to introduce Dave Svetlichny, the Director of Finance. Again, he's going to lead us through this today. Jeremy Storvold is the General Manager of the electric utility for the district. Devon Vandermeulen is the Manager of the water utility. And Chris Johnson is the Director of Works and Infrastructure. So all of the people that are involved with the utilities. Now, council met on November the 17th to talk about what we would like to see in terms of the utility rates for the three utilities for 2021. And we came up with some draft rates, and that's why we're here tonight, is to introduce those to the public, and then we'll go from there. So thanks very much for joining us. If you're on YouTube or otherwise, Dave, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to just share my screen and get the presentation on its way. There it is. Hopefully you all see that. So today, as the mayor mentioned, we are going to be running everyone through the 2021 utility budgets as well as the rates. This is our annual open house that we are required to bring forward. The agenda for today is to touch on a little bit of the council strategic priorities. We'll then go into having a conversation about asset management and some of the steps that council have taken in regards to that process. We'll then dive into the financial budgets themselves for the electric, the water, and the sewer funds. And at the end, we'll bring it all together and have a quick conversation about the proposed rates that council is looking at bringing forward for 2021. So shortly after council was elected back in 2018, they went through an exercise in which they discussed and formalized what their strategic priorities were. As the slide shows, council identified 6 main priorities to focus on. These priorities were infrastructure investment, good governance, community resilience, alternative energy, active lifestyles, and downtown vibrancy. These priorities, along with the identified principles at the bottom of this slide, set the parameters around how decisions are made, and in the context of today's presentation, how budgets are built. It should also be noted that these priorities are reviewed annually by council to ensure they are still strategically important priorities. In addition to council's strategic priorities, there are numerous other factors that need to be considered when putting together a budget. Existing versus new. Is it a new or existing project? If new, does it require additional resources that we currently don't have? Regulatory requirements oftentimes force municipalities into additional expenses, be it from either a health and safety perspective or additional testing, and oftentimes with little to no input from municipalities, and we bear the cost. When reviewing potential projects, we also need to look at the risks associated with the project, as well as the potential consequences of not moving forward with the project. So projects with high risks and high consequences are normally the first to move forward in the budgeting process, whereas a project with a low risk and a low consequence would be looked at in not as much light. Levels of service factor greatly into the financial planning process. The previous year's budgets normally set the benchmark for what a service level is at. And throughout the course of a year, the district receives many requests from residents to increase levels of service, i.e. mowing the fields more or sweeping the streets more than once a year, or those types of service level increase requests. The budgeting process that we go through does take these requests into consideration. However, one thing to note when discussing levels of service is that very rarely do residents want to see reductions in their service levels. And when looking at increases to the service levels, these increases require, for the most part, additional charges to the residents as those service levels are increased. A final factor impacting the financial plan is funding. How will we fund the increased level of service, new project, or regulatory requirement? Should it come from the actual users of the service? If it benefits the entire organization, should it be funded through taxation? Are there grants available? There are numerous questions when it comes into play when looking at funding options. So all of these 5 factors, and there's a lot more that also come into play, along with council's strategic priorities, drive the final financial plan and ultimately the rates Summerland residents are charged. So the next 3 slides will provide an overview of the district's utility assets. So when we look at the sanitary sewer system, we have approximately 80 kilometers of collection pipe, 2,400 sewer services, a wastewater treatment plant, and 7 lift stations. Those are the main physical assets of the system. Looking at water, 220 kilometers of water mains, 6,000 services, 440 hydrants, 12 reserves, 14 dams, a water treatment plant, 13 PRV stations, 9 pump stations, and 3 in-ground storage tanks. Most likely when we look at our system, the water utility is by far the most robust when it comes to actual physical assets, and the most expensive. Looking at the electrical utility, we have 2 substations, 9 feeders, 3,700 poles, 1,500 transformers, which we're currently in the process of replacing on an annual basis, 280 kilometers of conductor and 60 kilometers of underground cable, and 1,350 street lights. So based on asset management work that's been done over the past few years, it's estimated that the district's replacement cost of all of our utility infrastructure, so all the utility that we just talked about in those 3 slides, would cost us over $350 million if we had to replace everything today. Of course, that's not how things work. We all know that as assets are consumed over a period of years, So we've had to calculate that the district's current utility infrastructure deficit is approximately $85 million right now. To put this into some context, it's projected that at the end of 2020, our utility reserve balances will be at $12 million. So this large variance has highlighted the need to the district that significant investment is still required in order to support the long-term needs of this community. To address this need, Council committed to a 5-year rate increase plan specific for asset management reserve contributions in 2020. The plan provides for 5% water rate increases until 2024 and 3.5% sewer rate increases until 2024. Additionally, the plan provided for a one-time increase to electric rates of 3.5% in 2020. So the slide summarizes what those dollar figures look like. And as we can see, a 3.5% increase in sewer, because it is a small utility, equates to $49,000 in contributions. Whereas in the water utility, because it's a much larger utility, a 5% increase equates to almost $174,000. So what does this all mean? This chart shows the effect of compounding and what contributions will look like over a 5-year period. Organizationally, and if council stays the course, the district will have almost tripled the amount of funds allocated to reserve in the next 5 years, and in total would have allocated $5.78 million into reserves over this 5-year period. Now, this is a huge step in the district's overall asset management plan, and the effects of this decision will be discussed further when we look at the 5-year capital plans further on in this presentation. The proposed sewer operating budget is a status quo budget. All the budgets being presented today are status quo. The budget considers contract increases such as union contracts, third-party rate increases such as ICBC and our insurance premiums, as well as operational projects approved by council. And there are no real big changes from where we expect 2020 to end. As noted previously on the previous few slides, the 2021 operating budget does incorporate a 3.5% rate increase, which is being directly transferred into reserves for future capital expenditures. The proposed budget does not include any additional increases required for operational purposes. So overall, when we look at the budget, expenditures are up 3.19% from the prior year. Now, a big key here to note, again, is that 3.5% of that is going directly into reserves. So taking that 3.5% out, our operational expenses have actually gone down 0.31% when comparing to 2020. Now, and also as a standalone utility, it should not come as a surprise to see the majority of the revenue that's being collected, which is about 2.26 million or 73%, coming from user fees and parcel taxes, which is normally the case when we're looking at utilities themselves, which are based on user fees and taxes. The 2021 operational budget for sewer, as we noted on the last slide, is to run the sewer utility is $3.08 million. The services that include are administration, sewage collection, treatment, and disposal. We run a sandy dump service down in Trout Creek. There's lift station maintenance, sludge removal, preventative maintenance, capital reserve transfers, and debt charges. 2/3 of the expenses make up about $2 million in 2 line items. Sewage collection and treatment, the budget for 2021 is $911,000. And the largest component in the sewer fund is debt charges at $1 million. So those 2 components alone make up 2/3 of the overall expenses in the sewer utility. The following proposed changes have been incorporated into the 2020 budget and take it away from being a completely status quo budget. So the district is looking at, we've increased sludge removal costs of $117,000 in the sewer utility to cover the overall composting costs. The primary reason for this is if the district did not compost, we would have to get rid of our sludge in a different manner. Right now, we're fortunate to have the composting facility or to be able to compost up at our landfill, and we can dispose of that sludge at a much lower cost than if we had to put it into trucks and transport it out to another facility. So what the 2021 budget is proposing is to increase that sludge removal an additional $117,000 to offset the cost of what the composting costs the district on the utility or in the landfill utility side. We're also looking at increasing treatment plant operational upgrades by about $40,000. There's a couple projects. One is purchasing an equalization tank and rebuilding some C3 pumps that are required at the treatment plant. As we've discussed, I think, numerous times now, there's an increase to the reserve transfer of $54,000. That's the 3.5% that has been earmarked for an additional transfer to the reserve account, as well as a $27,000 increase in debt payments. The district, we refinanced some debt this year, and although there were lower interest rates, there was actually a lower actuarial rate as well. So the principal amount has gone up just a little bit. And the last item there is the projected surplus for 2021 in the sewer utility is $350, when it was $143,000 in 2020. So there definitely is a decrease in the projected surplus. However, as noted previously, we do not require an increase in rates due to operations. So that's a positive note as well. Looking at the capital fund on the sewer utility, the sewer utility is one of the newest within the district. So when we're looking at the capital outlays, they're not as large as we see in the other two utilities, and we'll get to those shortly. You can see that in 2021, we're looking at 3 projects, an HVAC unit replacement at the wastewater treatment plant, a filter building renovation, and a UV disinfection upgrades, doing some design work there. So just under $300,000 that's being proposed to be spent in 2021. Looking at a 5-year average, we're looking at about $2.65 million annually in the sewer utility. So what this slide tries to summarize is the district's proposed 5-year capital plan, along with the additional reserve contributions that we've already talked about over the next 4 years, in order to try to project where reserve levels will be at the end of 2025. The promising note is that in the sewer fund, at least over the next 5 years, we'll be able to complete all of its proposed capital expenditures without having to go into additional debt. So that's definitely a positive. Again, on the water side, as noted previously, this is a status quo budget. There aren't really any operational changes. There's a couple that we will discuss in coming slides. As noted, the 2021 operating budget incorporates a 5% rate increase, which is being directly transferred into reserves for future capital. The proposed budget does not include any additional increases required for operational purposes. It should also be noted that agricultural water rates are not being increased by 5%. These rates are being set at their initial 2020 rate, which was $192.89 per arable acre. In looking at the budget and comparing it to historical or the 2020 original budget, there's an increase of just over 0.24%. The services that are provided from the water utility, again, there's administration, treatment, distribution, dam maintenance, hydrant maintenance, debt charges, capital reserve transfers, some meter maintenance, and preventive maintenance. Looking at the line items individually, debt charges come in at $1.3 million. So that is the highest component of the water utility, followed by treatment and distribution. Treatment is $1.3 million, distribution is $1.07 million. Overall, the budget for 2021 in the water utility is $6,020,000 to operate and maintain the water utility. When we look at the 2021 budget, the proposed changes that have been incorporated into this budget are there's some water treatment plant equipment replacement that needs to be done at a cost of $76,000. The dam maintenance projects have actually decreased by $89,000 as in 2020 there was some projects that were completed that no longer needed to be done in 2021. So that $89,000 is coming out of that budget. There's some cathodic protection replacements that are being required for about $50,000 over the next few years. Some screening work, gate replacement at $20,000. Again, the increased reserve transfer, that is the 5% rate increase attributed to the asset management plan and going straight into reserves. And the final number there is a decrease of $240,000 in the projected surplus. We are projecting a surplus in the water utility in 2021 of just over $20,500, where in 2020 it was $260,000. So again, just like with the sewer utility, the rate increase is specific to asset management and is not being required at all for any operational increases. Looking at the capital, a little different than the sewer utility. Again, looking back at that inventory list that we went through at the very beginning of the presentation, the water utility is extremely large and has numerous assets that need to be maintained and replaced. There's a list, I won't go through all of them there, but there's about 8 projects that the district is looking at having completed in 2021 at a cost of $3.755 million. This capital plan takes 2 other items into note. This budget allocates $2 million of gas tax funding for annual water main replacements. So we look at $500,000 annually that the district utilizes from gas tax funding to cover off water main replacements. So Canyon View Road down on the bottom there would be the one for slated for 2021. Was someone trying to say something?
Oh, I think we're okay. I heard that funny sound too, but I think we're all right.
Okay. The second item to note in the district's 5-year plan in the water fund is that the plan is based on borrowing $7.3 million for 2 projects in 2021 and 2022. Overall, our average 5-year spend is just over $4 million. So again, very much larger scale than the sewer utility. So this slide again tries to summarize the district's proposed 5-year capital plan, along with the additional reserve contributions over the next 4 years. As the projection shows, we are expecting reserve levels to decrease by about half over this time period. Additionally, and unlike the sewer utility, this capital plan does require $7.3 million in debt financing to complete the 2 projects, the one being Eisentalk Dam and the second being Giants Head Road. The debt financing is needed as reserves, as we can see, are not capable of funding these projects. Moving on to the electrical utility. The electrical utility budget is the only utility that we'll discuss today that requires a rate increase due to operational increases. However, the reason for this required increase is due to Fortis increasing their wholesale rate by 4.36%, which will cost the district an estimated $344,000 in additional purchasing costs. As an organization, we were able to find some efficiencies within our operations to curtail some operational expenditures. However, a rate increase of 3.62% is needed to balance the budget. When we look at the electrical utility itself and the services that it provides for the residents of Summerland, there's an administration component. There's the largest component, which is the electricity we actually purchase from Fortis. There's some systems operations, some brushing costs, meter reading and maintenance, underground locates, capital reserve transfers, and a dividend to the general fund. The overall cost of operating the electrical utility that's been budgeted for in 2021 is $12.46 million. 8.8 of that is electrical power that we purchase from Fortis. So by and large, the largest component of our operational costs. From a status quo perspective, a couple items to note. The biggest one, of course, being the Fortis rate increase of 4.36%, which is going to cost the district approximately $344,000 in additional expenses. There is a $23,000 increase in some pull yard operational projects that are required this year. However, there's an offsetting $40,000 in operational supplies. When we looked at historical actuals and comparing them to prior years, we were able to decrease operational supplies by the $40,000. There's also an increase in electrical meter purchases of $20,000, as there's a requirement by, I believe it's, I want to say StatsCan, but I know that's wrong. It is a regulatory requirement which we are required to maintain and test our meters. So we are a year behind due to COVID, and we are required to increase those electrical meter purchases. On the capital side, the district's looking at spending just over $6 million in 2021. Of the $6 million, $4.6 million is projected to be grant funded, with 2 main projects, the solar and battery storage, as well as the voltage conversion project. So those 2 are predominantly grant funded. We do need to be cognizant that as time does go on, the capital plan will increase. And if we don't maintain or increase the amount of funds being allocated to the reserve, then we might end up in the same situation as the water fund sees itself, where we're going to need to start borrowing to complete some of our projects. However, at this point in time, on average, a $2.5 million spend on the electrical utility capital side. So reserve levels, we are projecting reserve levels to stay relatively stable over this 5-year period, even with that average annual spend being 2.5 million. The major reason for this consistency is that we are budgeting for $8.14 million in grants for 3 projects over this 5-year period. Without this grant funding, the district would not have sufficient funds to complete the proposed projects and could potentially have to borrow approximately 3.8 million to complete these projects. So what does all of this mean to the average resident of Summerland? With a 5% water rate increase, we're estimating that we will see a $39.50 per year increase from $790 to $830. On the sewer side, a 3.5% rate increase gives us a $14.30 annual increase. And on the electrical utility side, an increase from $1,509 to $1,563, or $54.61 per year. So on an annual basis, taking into account all 3, a total increase of just over $108 for all 3 utilities. And again, I just want to note that on the agricultural water side, council has kept the same original rate as 2020 of $192.89, and no 5% rate increase on that. So just taking that rate, council did provide a 25% rate reduction in 2020. So it's just taking that back to where it was at the beginning of the year. So that, Madam Mayor and public councillors, brings us to the end of our presentation. We do have a couple different ways that people can get in touch with us. If someone that's currently listening either on the YouTube channel, they can call. We'll probably leave about 2 or 3 minutes here. They can call the number that's on the screen, 778-907-2071. And we'll be here to answer those questions. Alternatively, any emails can go to budget@summerland.ca, any related to the 2020 utility rates or the budgets themselves. And I will just stop sharing my screen now. I see that there are no members of the public that are currently on the call right now. However, as we are on YouTube, we'll give it a couple minutes and just see if anyone wants to call in and say hello.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Svetlichny. There was one person on during the bulk of your presentation, but I don't see that person on now. So we'll just hang out here for another 2 or 3 minutes and then we'll wrap it up.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Could you give me a reminder, Dave, with the electrical utility, just like in 2020. Were the rates applicable, the 3.62% for just the 1 year, or have we moved that out to 2024 like the other two utilities?
The 3.5% increase that was earmarked in 2020 was specific to 2020, Madam Mayor.
But the 3.62% for 2021, is that for 2021 only, or does it go out to 2024 like the other two utilities do?
That's for 2021 only,
Okay, good.
That's,
That's what I thought.
specific for operational increases.
Yes, thank you. So should we call it a session over then?
Sounds good to me, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, council, for attending and staff for attending, and Dave for your presentation. And yeah, maybe you'll get something by email.
I
Thanks
hope
so
so.
much. Okay, bye-bye.